that got angry and questioned God, and he responded. Number 1. Habakkuk. Habakkuk means to wrestle or embrace, and there is no doubt that he struggled with significant concerns regarding God's plan. Habakkuk went to the Lord with his concerns and questions. The prophet speaks directly to God, the people not being involved at all as the conversation takes place. Number 1. Habakkuk's turmoil, what he says. This prophet pondered the question of why God allowed the people of Judah to continue living in such a wicked and immoral manner. He cried out to God, but at first, God did not respond to his prayers. God seems far too tolerant for Habakkuk's tastes. Habakkuk chapter 1 verses 1 and 2. The pronouncement which Habakkuk the prophet saw. How long, Lord, have I called for help, and you do not hear? I cry out to you violence, yet you do not save. Even though I scream to you violence, you will not save. Habakkuk was struggling to make sense of the paradox that is God's providence and how it works. He couldn't understand why it seemed like God was doing nothing. It appeared as though God was doing nothing to stop the sin that was being committed by people. Habakkuk chapter 1 verses 3 and 4. Why do you make me see disaster and make me look at destitution? Yes, devastation and violence are before me. Strife exists and contention arises. Therefore the law is ignored, and justice is never upheld. For the wicked surround the righteous. Therefore justice comes out confused. Then he described Judah's sins and lamented that evil people seemed to have the upper hand. Justice was a sham. God answered Habakkuk's question by saying, Habakkuk chapter 1 verse 5. Look among the nations, watch, be horrified, be frightened, speechless. For I am accomplishing a work in your days. You would not believe it even if you were told. Keep a watchful eye on the nations. Habakkuk chapter 1 verses 6 to 11. For behold, I am raising up the Chaldeans, that grim and impetuous people who march throughout the earth, to take possession of dwelling places that are not theirs. They are terrifying and feared. Their justice and authority originate with themselves. Their horses are faster than leopards, and quicker than wolves in the evening. Their horsemen charge along. Their horsemen come from afar. They fly like an eagle swooping down to devour. All of them come for violence. Their horde of faces moves forward. They gather captives like sand. They make fun of kings, and dignitaries are an object of laughter to them. They laugh at every fortress, then heap up dirt and capture it. Then they fly along like the wind and pass on. But they will be held guilty, they whose strength is their God. Then God revealed how he would punish his people for their sins by sending the dreadful Chaldeans, Babylonians. Habakkuk chapter 1 verses 12 to 17. Are you not from time everlasting, Lord my God, my Holy One? We will not die. You, Lord, have appointed them to deliver judgment, and you, O Rock, have destined them to punish. Your eyes are too pure to look at evil, and you cannot look at harm favorably. Why do you look favorably at those who deal treacherously? Why are you silent when the wicked swallow up those more righteous than they? Why have you made people like the fish of the sea, like crawling things that have no ruler over them? The Chaldeans bring all of them up with a hook, drag them away with their net, and gather them together in their fishing net. Therefore they rejoice and are joyful. Therefore they offer a sacrifice to their net and burn incense to their fishing net. because through these things their catch is large, and their food is plentiful. Would they therefore empty their net and continually slay nations without sparing? God's response did not appease Habakkuk. Rather, it seemed to create a larger concern about God's ability, as well as his apparent inconsistency. Lord, I don't understand this inactivity either. Habakkuk said, but now you tell me you're going to punish your own people with a people far worse than they are? What exactly is going on here? These are common questions, because God's actions appear to contradict what we know about his character. When faced with difficulties in life, the first step should be to address them directly to God. Your openness poses no threat to him. Even our Lord on the cross asked, why? Matthew chapter 27, verse 46. And about the 9th hour, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani? That is, my God, why have you forsaken me? Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 1. I will stand at my guard post and station myself on the watchtower, and I will keep watch to see what he will say to me, and how I may reply when I am reprimanded. Habakkuk then built a watchtower so he could stand on the rampart and watch. In ancient days, watchtowers were built in the fields to assist to protect the produce. Habakkuk was expressing his desire to get a higher perspective, and he would wait to hear what God had to say. Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 2. Then the Lord answered me and said, write down the vision and inscribe it clearly on tablets, so that one who reads it may run. God instructed Habakkuk to write his word in huge letters so everyone could read it. God would respond to Habakkuk's questions, and everybody would be able to read them. The first statement made by God is that time is important. Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 3. For the vision is yet for the appointed time. It hurries toward the goal, and it will not fail. Though it delays, wait for it will certainly come. It will not delay long. He may appear to be slow in his acting, but bear with him, because his timing is perfect. Because God is in control, timing is essential. We reside in the shadow of two massive peaks. The first is the birth mountain, and the final is the death mountain. We exist in the valley of time between these 2 points. God is in complete control of his actions, and we only await his arrival. Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 4. Behold, as for the impudent one, his soul is not right within him, but the righteous one will live by his faith. The righteous shall live by his faith. It's a matter of trust. Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 20. But the Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth be silent before him. But the Lord is in his holy temple, God declared. Let the entire earth be silent in his presence. That is the third and most crucial answer to life's questions. Despite the world's thrones and temples falling, God remains in power. Nothing on this planet, no power, nation, or army can dethrone God from his throne. God is seated on his throne. Just keep believing in him. Habakkuk's triumph, what he sings. We find a changed man here. Habakkuk has gone from wailing to singing, gloom to glory, and question marks to exclamation points. He started this writing in the valley and finished it on top of a mountain. What has changed? Neither God nor Habakkuk's circumstances were to blame. Instead, Habakkuk had learned to trust in the Lord and was preparing to sing. Habakkuk then concluded by saying that God was his strength. Habakkuk didn't have all the answers, but he put his faith in his powerful God, who did. God appointed Habakkuk, a contemporary of Jeremiah and Ezekiel, to lead in tumultuous times. His name means to embrace, and he earned it by wrestling with God at the beginning of his book and attaining intimate closeness with God by the end. Habakkuk tells us that it is permissible to challenge God. We should have such a close relationship with God that we can freely communicate our questions, worries, or bewilderment about God's methods. We should turn to God for guidance when we don't know what to do. Habakkuk posed precise and specific queries. Leaders must be confident enough to confess they don't know everything and seek guidance from God. Finally, the most important leadership value we can learn from Habakkuk is trust. He knew he wasn't in control any more than we are today. He waited for God. When God finally spoke, Habakkuk had to trust him because he didn't understand. In essence, his final psalm says, "Although I don't understand what's going on and nothing is going the way I want it to, I'll still rejoice and trust God's wisdom." Habakkuk must learn to follow God as the leader. In the beginning, the Lord remains silent and teaches his leader to wait. He eventually replies to Habakkuk's criticism in an unexpected way and teaches his leader to trust. He later demonstrates his supreme sovereignty over all things and encourages his leader to rejoice regardless of the circumstances. The way God treats Habakkuk elevates him to a whole new level of leadership. May God do the same for each of us. Number 2. Job. In this Bible story from the book of Job, a wealthy man named Job lives in an area called Uz with his extended family and vast flocks. He is blameless and upright, always striving to live a moral life. He had a very disciplined relationship with God. God extols Job's virtues to Satan, but Satan counters that Job is only righteous because God has lavished him with favor. Satan dares God that, if given the approval to inflict suffering, Job will change and curse God. God allows Satan to torment Job in order to test this bold claim, yet he stops Satan from taking Job's life. Job receives 4 reports in one day, each notifying him that his sheep, servant, and 10 children have all died as a result of thieving invaders or natural disasters. In his grief, Job tears his garments and shaves his head, but he still praises God in his prayers. Satan arrives in heaven again, and God allows him another opportunity to test Job. Job is suffering from horrible skin rashes this time. Job's wife tries to persuade him to denounce God and give up and die, but he resists and tries to bear his sufferings. 2 plots are expertly intertwined, a heavenly plot and an earthly plot. The events on earth are the result of something that has already happened in heaven, just as there is a war on earth immediately following a conflict in heaven in the book of Revelation. 3 of Job's friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, arrived to console him, sitting with him in silence for 7 days to honor his grief. Job speaks on the 7th day, beginning a dialogue in which each of the 4 men provides poetic descriptions of his problems. Job curses his birthday. He wishes he had never been born and that his birth had been obscured by darkness, believing that life only adds to his anguish. Eliphaz responds that Job, who had previously consoled others, now admits that he was unaware of their suffering. Eliphaz concludes that Job's suffering must be the result of some sin committed by Job, and he advises Job to seek God's favor. Bildad and Zophar agree that Job must have done evil to provoke God's justice, and argue that he should try to be more innocent. Bildad believes Job's children brought their deaths on themselves. Worse, Zophar implies that whatever mistake Job made has caused him far more pain than he has received. Job reacts angrily to each of these remarks, becoming so enraged that he refers to his sympathizers as worthless physicians who paint their health with lies. He wonders why God evaluates people based on their actions when God can easily amend or pardon their actions. Job is perplexed as to how a human being may fully satisfy God's justice, given that God's ways are mysterious and beyond human comprehension. The suffering shows too much for Job, and he turns bitter, anxious, and scared. He deplores the injustice that God lets evil people thrive while he and many other honest people suffer. Job wants to face God and protest, but cannot physically find God. He thinks that wisdom is hidden from mankind, but he resolves to pursue it by fearing God and avoiding evil. Eventually, God steps in. The Divine Dialogue, Round 1, The Creator. During his speeches, 36 times Job asked God to speak with him. He has now received his wish. Both times when God speaks to Job, it occurs in the midst of a storm. There is much humor in the way that God addresses him. Job is reminded by God that he is the creator of everything. He runs through his awesome activity of creating and sustaining the world, asking Job whether he could match this work. Job chapter 38. Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, "Who is this that darkens counsel, questioning my authority and wisdom, by words without knowledge? Now gird up your loins like a man, and I will ask you, and you instruct me. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you know and have understanding. Who determined the measurements of the earth, if you know? Or who stretched the measuring line on it? On what were its foundations fastened? Or who laid its cornerstone? When the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God, angels shouted for joy. Or who enclosed the sea with doors when it burst forth and went out of the womb? When I made the clouds its garment and thick darkness its swaddling band, and marked for it my appointed boundary, and set bars and doors defining the shorelines, and said, This far you shall come, but no farther, and here your proud waves shall stop. Since your days began, have you ever commanded the morning and caused the dawn to know its place, so that light may take hold of the corners of the earth, and shake the wickedness out of it? The earth is changed like clay into which a seal is pressed, and the things of the earth stand out like a multicolored garment. Their light is withheld from the wicked, and the uplifted arm is broken. Have you entered and explored the springs of the sea, or have you walked in the recesses of the deep? Have the gates of death been revealed to you, or have you seen the gates of deep darkness? Have you understood the expanse of the earth? Tell me, if you know all this. Where is the way where light dwells? And as for darkness, where is its place? That you may take it to its territory, and that you may know the paths to its house. You must know, since you were born then, and because you are so extremely old. Have you entered the storehouses of the snow? Or have you seen the storehouses of the hail, which I have reserved for the time of trouble, for the day of battle and war? Where is the way that the light is distributed, or the east wind scattered over the earth? Who has prepared a channel for the torrents of rain and for the flood, or a path for the thunderbolt, to bring rain on the uninhabited land, and on the desert where no man lives, to satisfy the barren and desolate ground, and to make the seeds of grass to sprout? Has the rain a father? Or who has begotten the drops of dew? Out of whose womb has come the ice, and the frost of heaven, who has given it birth? Water becomes like stone and hides itself, and the surface of the deep is frozen and imprisoned. Can you bind the chains of the cluster of stars called Pleiades, or loosen the cords of the constellation Orion? Can you lead forth a constellation in its season, and guide the stars of the Bear with her sons? Do you know the ordinances of the heavens, or can you establish their rule over the earth? Can you lift up your voice to the clouds so that an abundance of water will cover you? Can you send forth lightnings that they may go and say to you, "Here we are"? Who has put wisdom in the innermost being of man, or in the layers of clouds, or given understanding to the mind of man, or to the heavenly display? Who can count the clouds by earthly wisdom, or pour out the water jars of the heavens? When the dust hardens into a mass and the clouds stick together because of the heat? Can you, Job, hunt the prey for the lion, or satisfy the appetite of the young lions when they crouch in their dens and lie in wait in their lair? Who provides prey for the raven when its young cry to God and wander about without food? He finishes by asking whether Job is in a position to judge, telling him that it is impertinent for Job to believe that God should explain himself to him. Job is made to feel very small. Eventually, Job replies, "I am unworthy. How can I reply to you? I put my hand over my mouth. I spoke once, but I have no answer. Twice, but I will say no more." Round 2. Creatures. In the second round, God doesn't talk about himself as creator, but about 2 of his creatures. The discourse is full of humor once more. He asks Job for his thoughts on the behemoth and the leviathan, as though these amazing beasts hold the answers to life's big issues. Job chapter 39. Do you know the time when the wild goats of the rock give birth to their young? Do you observe the calving of the deer? Can you count the months that they carry offspring? Or do you know the time when they give birth? They kneel down, they bring forth their young, they cast out their labor pains. Their young ones become strong, they grow up in the open field. They leave and do not return to them. Who sent out the wild donkey, free from dependence on man? And who has loosed the bonds of the wild donkey to survive in the wild? To whom I gave the wilderness as his home, and the salt land as his dwelling place. He scorns the tumult of the city, and does not hear the shouting of the taskmaster. He explores the mountains as his pasture, and searches after every green thing. Will the wild ox be willing to serve you, or remain beside your manger at night? Can you bind the wild ox with a harness to the plow in the furrow, or will he plow the valleys for you? Will you trust him because his strength is great and leave your labor to him? Will you have faith and depend on him to return your grain and gather it from your threshing floor? The flightless wings of the ostrich wave joyously, with the pinion, shackles, fetters, and plumage of love, for she leaves her eggs on the ground and warms them in the dust, forgetting that a foot may crush them, or that the wild beast may trample them. She treats her young cruelly, as if they were not hers, though her labor is in vain because she is unconcerned for the safety of her brood. For God has made her forget wisdom, and has not given her a share of understanding. Yet when she lifts herself on high, so swift is she that she laughs at the horse and his rider. Have you given the horse his might? Have you clothed his neck with quivering and a shaking mane? Have you, Job, made him leap like a locust? The majesty of his snorting nostrils is terrible. He paws in the valley and rejoices in his strength. He goes out to meet the weapons of armed men. He laughs at fear and is not dismayed. And in battle, he does not turn back from the sword. The quiver rattles against him, as do the flashing spear and the lance of his rider. With fierceness and rage he races to devour the ground, and he does not stand still at the sound of the war trumpet. As often as the trumpet sounds, he says, "Aha!" and he smells the battle from far away, and senses the thunder of the captains and the war cry. Is it by your understanding that the hawk soars, stretching his wings toward the south as winter approaches? Is it at your command that the eagle mounts up and makes his nest on high in an inaccessible place? On the cliff he dwells and remains securely upon the point of the rock and the inaccessible stronghold. From there he spies out the prey. His eyes see it from far away. His young ones suck up blood, and where the slain are, there is he. Job is reminded that he does not comprehend God. He doesn't understand the animal world, let alone the moral world. So God's main point is, why are you attempting to argue with me? Job responds that God is all-knowing, and that no plan of his can be thwarted. He now realizes that his questioning of God was completely inappropriate, and he despises himself and repents in dust and ashes. Although Job's encounter with God is humiliating, the core of his problem is resolved because he is back in touch with God. The dialogue provides a magnificent if unexpected climax to the book. Job's children, 7 sons and 3 daughters, property and camel and sheep flocks are returned to him by God, and he becomes far wealthier and happier than he was before. He has been vindicated as God's servant. Job's 3 friends, on the other hand, are severely chastised by God. He claims they have not spoken accurately about Job, implying that we should not quote their speeches as if they were true. The remarkable thing about God's 2 rounds with Job is that he still doesn't answer Job's questions, and he doesn't tell Job about his wager with Satan. Job didn't need to know what was going on in heaven, because God had his reasons for allowing him to suffer. We must bear in mind one acute difference between a Jewish understanding of this book and a Christian one. The Jew of Old Testament times was unable to see the problems of temporal life in the light of eternity. He felt that the justice of God must be seen in this life, since both good and bad people went to the same destination, Sheol, the place of shadowy existence where departed spirits slept. Christians, on the other hand, have a completely different viewpoint on current suffering. They view the greater vision of heaven in light of Christ's work. Suffering in this world pales in comparison to the life that awaits us in heaven. Job declares at one point that he will meet God after he dies, but this is not a recurring topic in the book, and he has no idea how this will happen. For Christians, the book of Job can be seen in the context of the New Testament. God allowed Satan to bring about Jesus' death on the cross, with his own son asking the question, "My God, why?" As with Job, God didn't explain why. Number 3. Jonah. Jonah, whose name means dove, was proud, stubborn, disobedient, unfaithful, a grumbler, and all around bad-tempered. Jonah was the son of Amittai, a Zebulun native from Gath-Hepher. When God summoned Jonah to warn the violent and godless Ninevites of their impending doom, all his pride in being a Hebrew rose up in rebellion. Pagans to him were the worst kind of humans, not even fit to pollute the good earth by living on it. They were the untouchables, and that God should take an interest in them was unthinkable. As he was not one to put up with what was not to his liking, he fled to Joppa and obtained passage on a ship bound for Tarshish, which was in the opposite direction as Nineveh. A human father would probably have snubbed Jonah and found someone else to deliver his message to Nineveh, but not our Heavenly Father. If God has a purpose for someone, then the gifts and calling of God are irrevocable. He will either fulfill his purpose, or he will simply roll over him to accomplish what he has foreordained. Isaiah chapter 46, verses 9 and 10. Remember the former things long past, for I am God, and there is no other. I am God, and there is no one like me, declaring the end from the beginning, and from ancient times things which have not been done, saying, my plan will be established, and I will accomplish all my good pleasure. God rolled over Jonah with a vengeance, causing a violent storm to threaten the safety of his ship and its crew. This jarring awakening also made Jonah realize that far from being an artful dodger, he was being pursued by the Almighty. There was nothing left for him to do but admit what he had done and tell the sailors that only by throwing him overboard could they be saved. This they did, and the huge fish sent by God promptly devoured him. This, and the immediate stilling of the storm, brought the ship's crew to faith and salvation as a result. At this point, Jonah has now found himself in a situation worse than anything he could have imagined. But like Jacob, he has by now awakened to the fact that God is with him wherever he ends up, in obedience or disobedience. The result is a beautiful prayer of faith, rising up from the belly of the great fish, but still with a hint of spiritual pride. Jonah chapter 2, verses 8 and 9. Those who are followers of worthless idols abandon their faithfulness, but I will sacrifice to you with a voice of thanksgiving. That which I have vowed I will pay. Salvation is from the Lord. Jonah finally obeyed God. The Lord recommissioned Jonah to go to Nineveh, and this time he obeyed. After entering that great city, he announced that it would be overthrown in 40 days. The Ninevites, who worshipped the fish god Dagon, apparently knew what had happened to Jonah. Other men who have survived similar experiences in history had such mottled skin from the digestive juices that they would stand out in any crowd. He was assigned to them. The entire city repented and believed God, from the greatest to the least. A fast was proclaimed for man and beast alike, and sackcloth was put on all, from king to cattle. As a result, Nineveh was spared from the disaster. Jonah was enraged because Israel's Gentile adversaries had been spared. In despair, he begged to pass away, possibly fearing that Assyria would threaten Israel again. He was enraged at having to do God's will. Jonah's problem was that he didn't want to do God's will from the bottom of his heart. God wanted Jonah to understand how important his will is in the salvation of lost souls, whether Jew or Gentile. Jonah chapter 4, verses 5 to 11. Then Jonah went out of the city and sat east of it. There he made himself a shelter and sat under its shade, so that he could see what would happen in the city. So the Lord God prepared a plant, and it grew up over Jonah, to be a shade over his head to spare him from discomfort. And Jonah was extremely happy about the protection of the plant. But God prepared a worm when morning dawned the next day, and it attacked the plant and it withered. When the sun came up, God prepared a scorching east wind, and the sun beat down on Jonah's head, so that he fainted and he wished to die and said, "It is better for me to die than to live." Then God said to Jonah, "Do you have a good reason to be angry about the loss of the plant?" And he said, "I have a very good reason to be angry, angry enough to die." Then the Lord said, "You had compassion on the plant for which you did not work, and which you did not cause to grow, which came up overnight and perished overnight. Should I not have compassion on Nineveh, the great city in which there are more than 120,000 innocent persons, who do not know the difference between their right and left hand, and are not yet accountable for sin, as well as many blameless animals?" Jonah came to the conclusion that God had made a mistake and that the Ninevites would get what they deserved. Not only had Jonah forgotten how many times God had relented and forgiven Israel, but he had also forgotten that the Lord had created everyone in his image, including those in Assyria. To be honest, we do the same thing. We know from history, however, that the Assyrians returned to their wicked ways, and after over 150 years of grace, their capital was destroyed. However, there is a coming judgment for all. To find out the 4 signs that will take place before the second coming of Christ, click here.